A royal guard isn't supposed to move, ever. But when a little girl whispered a secret at Buckingham Palace, he blinked. Twice. In seconds, the internet exploded, and the palace was thrown into chaos. What happened next shook the crown. But first, let's go back to the beginning. It began like a scene out of a postcard. Crisp spring air, golden sunlight glinting off the ornate gates of Buckingham Palace, and a crowd of strangers momentarily united by curiosity and awe. But at the heart of this picturesque tableau stood someone whose presence was anything but ordinary. 8-year-old Emily Carson. Small for her age, with a mop of chestnut hair that refused to stay brushed and sleeves that dangled past her fingertips, Emily stood with her nose nearly touching the cold iron bars, eyes locked on a single man. To her, the palace was not just a tourist attraction. It was a storybook. And inside it lived characters that other people walked past without seeing. Most passed the guards without a second glance, treating them as part of the scenery. But Emily saw him, the man in red, unmoving, unblinking, unreachable, and she gave him a name, Mr. Tall. For weeks, she'd written him letters in her spiral-bound notebook with unicorn stickers peeling at the corners. Pages filled with questions, silly jokes, even drawings of him riding a dragon or eating ice cream with a crown, always signed the same way. Your secret friend, Emily. But nothing came back. No answer. No wink, no royal seal. Just silence. Today, she'd brought the notebook with her, held tight against her chest like it was a treasure map, and with all the resolve her tiny frame could muster, she approached the front of the tourist barricade. Her mother, Miranda, stood a few feet back, capturing the palace's facade on her phone, unaware that her daughter was about to do something quietly extraordinary. Emily looked up at the towering figure, so motionless he might have been carved from stone. Her heart thumped. Around her grown-ups murmured, their lenses trained on guards and gates and grandeur. But Emily saw none of it. She only saw him. Raising the notebook like an offering, she leaned forward and whispered the line she'd rehearsed in front of the mirror. "If I tell you a secret, will you blink twice?" There was a pause, just wind and clicking shutters. Then, his eyelids dropped once. Then again. 2 slow, deliberate blinks. For a beat, the world stilled. Then a wave of astonished gasps spread like wildfire through the crowd. Phones darted upward, faces turned. But Emily didn't flinch. She didn't scream or look for someone to validate the moment. She just smiled, soft, certain, and quietly victorious, as if her whole world had just whispered back. Behind the wrought iron facade of Buckingham Palace, beyond the gilded halls and ceremonial formality, a storm of institutional unease took root. Not among the royals or dignitaries, but in a narrow, windowless conference room 3 floors down, where protocol was king and sentiment a punishable offense. Ethan Doyle stood at rigid attention, his uniform pristine, but his posture betraying tension beneath the surface. At 28, he was the youngest Coldstream Guard assigned to the Queen's Gate, a post that demanded unshakable stillness, impassive control, and above all, invisibility. That morning, he had violated all 3. Across from him sat Major Collins, a man whose expression never seemed to shift from condescending skepticism. On a nearby monitor, frozen mid-frame, was the offending moment, a grainy smartphone video showing Ethan, undeniably, unmistakably blinking, twice, at a little girl holding a notebook. "A single blink is a tick," Collins began coldly. "But 2? That's communication." Ethan remained silent. "You broke protocol, Doyle. Twice." The words hit with military precision. No room for empathy. No room for the bleeding wound Ethan carried under the skin of his discipline. "She wasn't mocking me," Ethan said carefully. She looked at me like I was human. That's exactly the problem, Collins replied. You're not human out there. You're a symbol, a line of defense. That uniform doesn't care how anyone feels, least of all you. But feelings had slipped through anyway, uninvited, unstoppable. They had started 12 hours earlier when Ethan's phone rang at 4:17 a.m., the hospital nurse's voice trembling as she delivered the news that Emmy, his kid sister, hadn't made it through the night. She'd asked for him. She'd wanted to hear his voice. Ethan hadn't even been allowed to speak while on post. And then, just hours later, there she was. Another 8-year-old, not Emmy, but close enough to bring her ghost to life. Not crying, not begging, just offering him a secret and a way out of the numbness. So he blinked, not to break the rules, but to remember he hadn't died with her. But grief, no matter how genuine, carried no authority in the world Ethan had sworn to serve. The decision came quickly. Suspended. No pay. No appeal. As the door shut behind him, Ethan didn't feel anger, just the familiar hollowness of a soldier punished not for what he did, but for what he felt. 3 weeks passed like a tide pulling something cherished out to sea. Every afternoon after school, Emily Carson would beg her mother to walk by Buckingham Palace. And every time, she'd stop at the gate, peering through the black iron bars with silent hope. But the post stood empty. Or worse, manned by someone else. A stranger in the same red uniform, motionless as ever, but without the blink, without the secret, without him. No Mr. Tall. The absence hung heavier than any explanation could. Emily, who had once filled rooms with humming, bouncing, breathless chatter, grew quiet. She spoke less at dinner, smiled less when drawing. At night, as her mother tucked her in, she whispered questions she couldn't answer herself. Did I do something wrong? Did he stop liking my secrets? Miranda Carson, for all her strength as a single mother, felt the sting of that question like a paper cut to the heart. One night, as Emily slept with her arm curled around the spiral-bound notebook she never let out of reach, Miranda sat on the floor by her bed and flipped through it. Page after page of childlike scrawls, ink-smudged hearts, drawings of a tall guard laughing, dancing, even crying. But what stopped Miranda cold was the sincerity of her daughter's words. I think Mr. Tall is sad, too. Maybe he needs someone to talk to. Maybe he's just like me, good at hiding it. The next morning, Miranda took a photo of one of the letters and posted it online with a caption, Does anyone know what happened to the palace guard who blinked back at my daughter? The post exploded. In hours, Twitter threads unraveled the story. News outlets picked up the trail. A leaked internal memo, blurred but legible, surfaced, confirming what no one had dared imagine. The guard had been suspended. For blinking. Twice. Emily saw the headlines on her mother's phone. She didn't cry. She just stared, then quietly whispered, He got in trouble because of me. Guilt settled in her like fog, gentle but inescapable. But something stronger stirred beneath it. Compassion. She opened her notebook again and wrote with trembling hands, carefully choosing her words. I'm sorry if I made you sad. You don't have to blink anymore. But if you ever feel lonely, I can be your friend. I'm good at secrets. With her mother's help, she posted it online. This time with a tag. At Ethan Doyle, Coldstream. The world was watching now, and silence was no longer an option. By the time the public backlash reached Parliament, the story had already eclipsed the usual cycle of royal headlines. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't spectacle. It was something quieter, but far more potent. a moment of unscripted humanity in a world obsessed with ritual. Talk show hosts debated it. Editorials praised the girl's courage and questioned the rigidity of centuries-old tradition. Behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, where change moved slower than time itself, the unthinkable was being considered. Letters flooded in, not from activists or celebrities, but from veterans, school teachers, and grieving parents. One mother wrote, "My son died in uniform and never got to cry. Thank you for showing that a soldier can blink and still stand tall." A former guard sent his medal back in protest, declaring, "If silence is the price of service, I no longer wish to be honored for mine." The Queen's private secretary, typically insulated from noise beyond royal briefings, read aloud a handwritten message during a late meeting. It was scrawled in purple ink and ended with a child's drawing of a crown and a stick figure girl. The message, "Please give Mr. Tall his smile back. I think the palace needs more secrets like mine." The decision was unprecedented. No press conference, no official statement, just a whispered approval through the hierarchy. Ethan Doyle was reinstated, and, more remarkably, granted a single day where the rules would bend for something greater than protocol. That day, spring sunlight spilled across the palace forecourt, catching on flags and gold-tipped spears. Crowds swelled shoulder to shoulder, lining the gates. They didn't chant. They didn't cheer. They simply waited. A black limo arrived with quiet ceremony. Out stepped Emily Carson, hair brushed, notebook hugged tight to her chest. She walked slowly, but her eyes never left the tall figure waiting at post. Ethan stood where she'd seen him last, stoic, composed, but now not unreadable. His grief was still there, but so was something new. She reached the gate, stood on tiptoe, and raised her small hand. No one spoke. And then Ethan moved. A ripple passed through the crowd as he took a single step forward. Then, in a motion neither rehearsed nor required, he knelt. The bearskin hat tilted forward in silent reverence, not to crown or country, but to connection. Before the applause could erupt, before the photos flew across the internet, he leaned forward, just enough for her to hear, "I missed your secrets, Emily." And for a moment, in the shadow of monarchy, something infinitely more powerful took its place: grace.